Phoenix Rising, Willow Saga, Part 1, Birth of a Racer, Chapter 1, or Can Things Possibly Get Any Worse? In another part of the universe, so far away Earth is only just getting the light from the stars which kicked the bucket billions of years ago. Zan-Kanran was updating his report to his father. The young Zathrian put down his portable desk, sighed and stretched. Karan didn't need to do this report. It was unlikely that his father was even going to see it for a month, if he decided to read it at all, but it gave him something to do in between the long stretches of galactic travel. It was certainly better than checking his food and drink for deadly poisons, or constantly being on the guard for assassins or people who just have a grudge against his house. Also, this was necessary work. Even if it was highly unlikely his father would even permit Zan-Kanran to sponsor a racer for the Great Race, not when his half-brother, Zundiata, was already a sure win for their interests. The room he was in was dank, cramped, and nowhere near fit for someone of his house or station. Then again, that was the point of him being there in the first place. Zan-Kanran was no fool. He knew that if he had offended anyone in the other great houses, which, considering he was still alive and breathing, meant he was offending them, they would look in one of the upper levels in the grand rooms that was meant for any member of the great houses on all Zathrian ships at all times. Not here, at the bottom where the Drex of their people lived. In this case, Drex meaning anyone who is not in a great house and or fawning on a member of a great house at all times. As all rooms that are made by the Zathrian people, this one had 5 walls in the shape of a simple pentagon. The room was just big enough for Zan-Kanran to have a cot, not a bed mind you, but a cot, and to be able to take 5 steps in any direction. Then again, Zan-Kanran was incredibly pragmatic, and as long as he had a place to sit and do his work, nothing else mattered. Zan-Kanran turned to look at his reflection on the nearest wall. The walls on Zathrian ships and rooms tended to be reflective to ensure that if someone was sneaking behind you with a weapon or the intent to kill you, you could see them. The lower ranks didn't have the homicidal tendencies of the upper class and the nobility, so this wall was not as mere shine as he would have preferred. However, Zan was able to see his reflection just fine. Like all of his people, Karan's skin was pearl white and slightly translucent, with several aqua blue veins just barely visible to the naked eye. The veins around Zan-Kanran's eyes were dark, almost black, indicating that he really needed sleep. Speaking of the eyes, they were just larger than a human's to be noticeable, and were a soft golden color. Instead of round pupils, Zathrians had pentagon-shaped irises. This highly contrasted with their triangular facial features. His long silver hair was hanging free and sprung like a waterfall from his scalp to his waist. Zan-Kanran was not wearing the garb of those who would normally be in this room, a black uniform with an insignia of the Zathrian Empire on the left shoulder. Instead, he wore an off-white tunic with black trim on the collar and just below the elbows with the sleeves cut off. Dressed as he was, most would mistake him for a common passenger and no one of real importance, or someone to give orders to. The only thing that could possibly give him away were that there were 5 fingers on his hands. However, now was not the time to be concerned about it. Instead, Zan-Kanran was more concerned about the future of his people. Several generations ago, the Zathrians were a powerful empire that controlled most of the galaxy, but now they were on the verge of ruin. The infighting of the noble houses, along with the near depletion of Gainite in this area of the universe, caused the once great empire to crumble into a shell of its former glory. The intergalactic races, which were made during the peace treaty at the tail end of the last war over the few planets where Gainite could still be found, helped keep the Zathrians in a position of power to prevent their destruction by one of the other 4 major powers. However, the Zathrian Empire only had one racer, his brother. Zan-Kanran knew that Zundiata was the best racer his people would probably ever produce. Zan-Kanran knew if anything happened to his brother, the whole empire would likely crumble. Most thought that Zundiata was untouchable due to his status as his people's only racer. However, Zan-Kanran knew better. In this past cycle alone, there had been over 500 attempts on Zundiata's life. The Zathrian Empire needed more racers. There was nothing else to be done about it. Over the past 20 galactic weeks, Zan-Kanran had done his best to find more racers for the Empire. However, none of them could hold a candle to his brother. At best, they were above average. At worst, they had no business walking, let alone flying anything. Things would be easier if he could look at candidates outside his own species. After all, that is what most of the other powers did. But the Emperor was too stuck in his misled belief in Zathrian superiority to even consider the idea.
If that was true, then we wouldn't have to take part in these races at all.
Zan-Kanran mumbled to himself as he tried to rub the weariness from his eyes. The worst part was that no one else seemed to notice it. The power plays of the great houses only cared about their singular house, while the Emperor used their feuds to ensure that none could challenge him, including his own children. Everyone else beneath those groups were so indoctrinated on the Emperor's word being close to the law of gods to even think the system could be flawed. At that precise moment, as if answering an unspoken order, the door to Zan-Kanran's room opened. He knew who it likely was, considering he had made it so only a few people could open the door, all of whom worked directly for him. Nothing happened for several minutes, mostly because Zan wanted to see if this person would actually take the initiative to dare to break the sacred rules and try and talk to him. However, he knew it was unlikely, no matter how much he tried to get those who worked for him to break those silly rules.
I give you leave to enter my presence and speak freely,
Zan-Kanran said, trying to keep the frustration out of his voice. Kanran turned and watched as a Zathrian female about his age entered the room. She was a few inches shorter than Zan-Kanran was, with a slender, frail-looking body. Her hair grew like a mohawk from the middle of her head and draped over on one side like a horse's mane. Then again, that was true in all females of the Zathrian people. Her garb was the elegant black and silver ensemble that was worn by high-ranking soldiers. This elegance was used more to hide bladed weapons than anything else.
Shut the door, Zara,
Zan-Kanran stated, realizing she wasn't going to make the effort to do so unless he told her to.
Before a crewman walks by and sees my hands.
Zara nodded her understanding and put her right six-fingered hand on the doorway, causing the door to shut with a swish, all the while never turning her back on Zan-Kanran. She started to say, but then Zan-Kanran cut her off with a, "No honorifics!" Zan-Kanran had to tell her this over 1,000 times during this voyage. Could it really be so hard for one not in the great houses to talk to him like he was a normal person? Also, using his honorific title would be like painting a large sign saying assassination target right here. "I beg forgiveness," she pleaded. The male Zathrian sighed. It wasn't her fault. The blame was solely on his foolish culture and all the stupidity that was centered around the upper classes.
"No forgiveness is necessary,"
he said in the most gentle tone he could muster, given his frustration.
"Just please tell me why you came here."
Before Zara could answer, a loud noise could be heard somewhere above them. The ship shook and sirens went off all over the ship. That meant only one thing. They were under attack. "We are being attacked?" Zara answered, stating the obvious.
"Would never have guessed,"
Zan muttered to himself as he pulled his sword out from his hiding place. He addressed Zara.
"Any idea on who the attackers are?"
"We doubt it is one of the great houses because none of them would dare do an attack this brazen. Also, it seems their main goal is to board us, not destroy us,"
Zara quickly exposited.
"How many ships are there?"
Zan-Kanran asked as he put on his gloves, which made it look like he had 6 fingers.
12 small fighter-class ships and 1 carrier ship, sir."
Kanran cursed to himself. 12 ships and a carrier only meant one thing. The Black Raiders were attacking. The great houses were something Kanran could easily handle. The Black Raiders were a whole nother matter. If he didn't act quickly, every single living creature on this ship would be killed.
Go to the captain immediately. Tell him that this ship is to be evacuated by order of Zan-Kanran.
Zan-Kanran tore off his gloves, grabbed his sword, and headed out to what was likely his doom, with the utmost certainty that there wasn't anyone in the universe at this moment who was in a worse spot than him. On a different ship a few hours away, a human being named Willow Martinez awoke to a worse situation. First, she couldn't see. Second, she was completely submerged in water, and there was no way for her to breathe. Survival instincts took over instead of panic. Her athletic limbs lashed out and hit a smooth glass surface repeatedly until at long last, something popped open like a soda can, releasing her onto the floor. Once she hit the floor, she realized something else. She was naked. After a few moments sitting in total darkness, unsure of where she was or what had happened to her, bright red lights flooded the room, revealing a very strange sight. On her arms and legs, something she could only describe as black webbing that she couldn't feel but could see in the light clung to her mocha-colored skin. "What the hell?" Willow cried out as she tore the stuff off her. Once it was all gone, Willow looked around to try and get her bearings. The room was like half of a bubble. There didn't seem to be any way in or out. The only thing in the room, besides the tube she had popped out of, were a pile of clothes. Just by looking at them, the 19-year-old knew that they were her clothes. Before Willow was able to make any attempt to put them on, a voice that seemed to be coming from all around her flatly stated, "Life support systems malfunctioning. Life support systems malfunctioning. Please get to main bridge to fix problem. Life support systems malfunctioning." "Who are you and what the hell are you talking about?" Willow demanded, not at all liking what she was hearing. Instead of answering her question, the voice just repeated what it said the first time. "I'd love to go to this main bridge, but unfortunately there's no way for me to get out of this room." Willow grabbed her clothes and started putting them on. "Also, I'm not going anywhere naked." As if in answer to her question, a section of the wall suddenly vanished, revealing a corridor. Not really sure if it was safe, but knowing she had no choice, Willow stood up with her black and red motorcycle jacket clutched in her hands and walked into the corridor. The light here was red as well. However, the walls were not smooth as they were in the last room. Instead, they were almost, for lack of a better term, veiny. Willow decided to stop thinking about it. Things were strange enough as it was, and Willow could only take so much weirdness at once. After walking for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, she had no idea, the passageway opened up into what Willow knew had to be the bridge the voice had talked about. Also, at that very moment, the young human knew one thing. She was on a spaceship. There was absolutely nothing else it could be. If science fiction media had taught her anything, it was if you're in a room that has tons of blinky lights, a few chairs, and one big chair in the middle that looked like it was meant for a captain, you are most likely on a spaceship. The final nail in the coffin was how one side of the room seemed to be a giant window into the empty void that is outer space. "Life support systems malfunctioning. Please repair middle panel. Please repair middle panel." The voice boomed around her once again. "Which panel's the middle panel?" Willow inquired. The lights on all the panels except the one to her left turned off. Willow put on her motorcycle jacket as she walked over to the indicated panel. True, she had no idea how she was going to fix it, but hey, if the voice thought that an alien who was unfamiliar with their technology could do it, it couldn't be that hard. Once she got there, the panels seemed to melt away, revealing a bunch of wires. They were interconnected in ways that Willow could not conceive, let alone understand. "I'm gonna die a horrible, painful death," Willow stated, knowing with absolute certainty that there wasn't anyone in the universe in a worse situation than she was. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Phoenix Rising Willow Saga, story by A.M. Paulson and music by Adrian Martinez. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to Patreon. We can't do this show without your support. Thank you, and hope to see you next time.